Welcome to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project, where we're creating the blueprint to help you become the best human you can be. I'm your guide and fellow optimizer, Christopher Camp. Habits are the building blocks of our daily lives, quietly shaping how we spend our time, approach our task, achieve or fail to achieve our goals. It's been estimated that nearly 50% of our actions are habits that we do without even thinking about them. So whether positive or negative, these habits play an outsized role in shaping our progress, joy, and success. Therefore, it's in our best interest to do all we can to intentionally and deliberately cultivate the right habits. Accordingly, the title of our session today is Forming Habits for Success, Creating Productive Consistency in Everyday Life. To help us work through this topic today, we have Griffin Jax. Griffin is a Major League Baseball pitcher and a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. He's still active in the Air Force in the reserves as a captain. In 2021, when he made his Major League debut, he was the first graduate of the Air Force Academy to ever play in Major League Baseball. While pitching in the major leagues, he is also working on getting a graduate business degree. He's one of the most thoughtful, intentional, and deliberate human beings I know of, so I think he's in an excellent position to help us tackle this topic today. Well, Griffin, welcome to the show. Really appreciate you coming on the Human Optimization Project with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So the three big questions we're going to work through today. Number one, what does it mean to form a habit, and why is it so crucial for productivity and personal growth? The second big question, what are the main challenges people face when trying to develop good habits? And then the third, we'll try to get into some solutions. Our third question is, what practical strategies can help us create and sustain beneficial habits for long-term productivity? Sound fair to you?
That sounds great.
All right. So let's start with this first one. What does it mean to form a habit? But before we do, I'd like for you to take a second to maybe just explain your job, your role as a professional baseball pitcher. Kind of what does your day-to-day look like? What are your responsibilities? How do you prepare for that? I think it'd be helpful for the audience to have a good picture of that and kind of who you are to help frame the conversation.
Sure. So I'm a pitcher, and more specifically, I'm a relief pitcher. And my more specific role is I kind of throw one of the two of the last innings of the game, generally when we're winning. So high leverage, back into the bullpen guy. And sort of how I kind of view myself within my job is I like to try to be as consistent as possible. And with that comes a pretty, specific work ethic and dedication to the sport and my routine. I like to think that I get lost in my routine almost. It kind of helps me wipe the slate clean, good or bad, when I come to the ballpark. I have something pretty strict that I follow every single day, not much changes, so that good or bad, like I said, when I come to the ballpark, I put my baseball clothes on. I know that I am now entering baseball mode, and at that point, it just becomes, default mode. At that point, it's just check the list off, go down that list to get to the point where internally and mentally I'm ready to go and pitch that night.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, there's a lot of habits for sure, and like I said, my job is to sort of create that routine and that structure to where I almost lose myself in that. So it just becomes, I don't want to say monotonous because that kind of has a bad connotation, but it just becomes second nature.
Yeah, kind of automatic. And I think that it's helpful to explain to the audience too, the baseball season is 162 games stretched out over 6 months. If you add spring training in and hopefully some postseason action, you're looking at, easily 7 to 8 months worth of baseball where you're playing every day. And for you, during that, there's a chance you could pitch on any single one of those days. So you have to be prepared, and you don't know if you're going to go into the game or not until that time comes. But you have to prepare yourself every day as if you're going to do it. And I think that's true every single day, Sunday through Saturday. So I think that your role, there is a true benefit to being somebody who has those habits and can sustain them. Who can deal with the day in and day out and the repetitive nature of it and make it automatic. So I think that puts you in a perfect position to have this conversation with us today. So let's start with some definitions. So how do you define a habit, and why do you think habits play such a central role in our daily lives?
So kind of like what I was talking about a little bit earlier, I kind of view a habit as something that we fall back on, or we fall to, in stressful situations, just whatever our second nature is, what we've done over time, what we've done consistently, who we are, I think are just, our internal habits that make us up as a person. And, you know, with how often we do those things, and sometimes we do them without even being conscious of it, like that's what makes us who we are. That's what kind of defines our personality and our identity. So hopefully those are good things that we've created over the course of time to help us out in our daily lives, whatever that may be. For me, it's obviously sports, but there's also good habits. If you're into fitness and you're trying to create a more healthy lifestyle, there's good habits for you at any sort of profession you're doing, good habits at home for your family. So it's just those small things that might not even be like recognizable, that you're just doing daily in and out, that kind of shape who you are.
Mm-hmm. And I like that perspective, and that this is not something that you do just to be able to perform at a high level in professional baseball. I mean, this really sort of defines all aspects or different domains of your life. So your general fitness, your physical health, your professional life, your happiness, your relationships, your job. So I think is really widely applicable, not only to every person, but to really every aspect of every person's life as well. So why do you believe that habits are especially critical for people who are looking to get better, to either improve their productivity or improve their success? How do habits help people achieve that?
Well, I think it just goes back to like, what you do at an unconscious level. Like if what you're striving for, what you're trying to do, you're trying to create that structure or that routine, those small habits to help propel you to accomplish whatever goal that is, and to hopefully where you can just do it without even thinking about it. So like for me, I have small daily habits that help me get ready for my game. And it's now that where I am in my career, they just become second nature. Like I said, when I put my baseball clothes on, after I change from my street clothes to my baseball clothes in my locker, that's almost like an internal cue for me to flip into baseball mode. And then at that point, it's just one checklist after another. I'm going down the laundry list of things that are small habits that I got to do that day to get me ready to go and pitch that night. So I just think it helps put me in the best situation to accomplish whatever goal I'm trying to, in whatever environment that is.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it probably helps you automate that process, so it eliminates the recurrent decision that you have to make. So you don't have to say, okay, I put my uniform on. What do I do next? Now I have to do I do this or do I do that? No, you just know. That decision is already made. So it frees up that mental bandwidth from not having to make that decision. Now you can use that to actually concentrate and think about, okay, what are these hitters going to be doing tonight, and what's my approach? How's it going to be different? Because there's a part of your job that changes every day. That's really where you want that cognitive load to be, is in the part that actually is changing and thinking about the things that you should be thinking about.
For sure. And then we're human. So like the less that I can struggle with that decision, the more automatic it becomes, the less likely I am to deviate from that and go down, into my bad habits. So I just want it to become as automatic as possible to, again, like a good point, to help keep my mental, battery recharged and fresh. But also I think like we're all naturally just going to fall down off the ladder, per se, into our bad habits if we put too much effort or too much decision time into it.
Yeah, I think if we leave the door open for ourselves to make the decision, sometimes we'll make the wrong decision.
That's right.
So if you just close the door, you pre-decide, you make the decision ahead of time, you're going to do the right thing or the more beneficial thing.
For sure.
I think, which is really helpful. And I do think a lot of habit formation, people will knock on it and say, well, it's boring. It's not attractive. It's not fun. It's not exciting. And there is some truth to that, but I think making it automatic helps eliminate that. So you're not using whether or not this is exciting as the thing to make your decision, right? You're saying, no, this is just what I do. So I just do it automatically. So the boredom or the monotony that you'd used earlier doesn't really is not as much of a struggle or a problem. Has that been the case for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think earlier in my career, it definitely was. Like, I was struggling to find out who I was as a player, and like I said, I kind of view my identity now as like uh, as one being one of the most consistent guys I can be day in and day out. So again, it just goes back to those habits I've created
Mm-hmm.
internally and externally that just puts me in that mode of, okay, you for the most part, the team knows what they're going to get out of
Mm-hmm.
me that night. So it just removes any of that negative external distraction.
Mm-hmm. And we've all seen you do this with your baseball career, and you've continued to get better and accelerate, I think, as a result of it. In watching you develop these habits and these routines in baseball, has that transferred to other areas of your life and made it easier for you to see progress in other domains, whether it be your physical health or your relationships at home or other things that you're, business, school, other things that you're into? Has it helped you in those areas as well?
For sure. I think I've definitely been more predisposed to um, this this habit creation for majority of my life. I've been very um, straight edge. I've really enjoyed and thrived under some sort of routine and structure. So this, I wouldn't say was super hard for me to kind of latch onto. And it for sure, I think a lot of it came from a military background and just being at the Air Force Academy. But even before then, in high school, I knew that I always kind of thrived under that routine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely not just applicable to my baseball life. There's stuff that I do at home that I'm trying to be more conscious of because I do find it a little bit more automatic at the stadium and in the locker room than I do at home, and it's those are where my bad habits come out sometimes is at home. I may pick up my phone in front of my kids, and I just don't want them to be around that. So I have to cue it differently at home than I would at the field.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll get into a little bit about the sort of the technical aspects of how you actually do that. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. And it's also interesting and refreshing to hear that you've been doing this for such a long time, because I think that one of the things people don't realize is that when you start to stack habits and you accumulate good habits over time, the return on investment compounds, and you start to see accelerated benefits from that. Early on, it might be boring, and you might be going through that period where you're thinking about delayed gratification, but they all start to add up to each other, and then the benefits of them compound over time. That's been my experience. Have you experienced that as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I mean, it's so similar to investing. And there's a really good book. I forget who it's by, but it's called Atomic Habits.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about this principle. I think he calls it the plateau of latent potential,
Mm-hmm.
which is essentially what you're saying that there's this gap of time, and short, long, no one really knows what it's going to be for anything you're trying to achieve. And that gap from when you start to when you achieve, that's usually what stops most people from finishing or achieving that goal through that habit. But once people break through that plateau, that's when you see that growth
Mm-hmm.
over time. And like I said, it's different from everybody. It's different between every goal, so you never really know. But it's that daily compounding over time that helps achieve sort
Mm-hmm.
of anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Atomic Habits. It's by James Clear, which is
That's right.
phenomenal,
Yeah.
and a lot of the principles that we'll talk about today are in that. So I'd highly recommend that to our listeners and viewers. Let's transition into our second section here. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges people face when trying to develop good habits. So, what do you see as some of the most common misconceptions that people have about the time it takes to build a new habit?
I just think that a lot of people get discouraged
Mm-hmm.
when we're in such a instant gratification society that if it doesn't happen overnight, then people are just not willing to continue the work. And it's hard to look at it that way. It's a little bit unfair because, like most good things, it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Business wise, athletic wise, fitness wise, like it's just nothing really happens overnight. Nothing worthwhile, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's probably one of the biggest roadblocks in this, habit formation is just understand that it's going to be probably a lifelong battle, and that those daily wins stacked over time just add up to something great at the end.
When I think about myself and really others, I think that desire for instant gratification is huge. And I think that it can be a major deterrent for forming good habits. And actually, if we think about what most of the bad habits are that we pick up, whether it's, too much time on our phone or social media or drinking, smoking, eating, and whatever, if you think about whatever bad habit you have in your life, usually your reward that you're seeking is some form of quick or instant gratification. But then if you stop and reflect on most of the good habits that you have in your life, those come with a form of delayed gratification.
Yep.
So in a lot of ways, one of the biggest differentiators between good habits and bad habits is instant gratification you're seeking in the bad habits, or delayed gratification you're looking for with the good habits.
Yeah.
And I think that you're exactly right. That gratification is delayed, which can make it challenging for people, but that does make it much more meaningful and impactful and worthwhile as well.
That's right.
So I think the gratification is a huge one. And I think that's a common misconception that people have, is either they think forming a habit is going to be quick, or they think that they're going to get some instant benefit from it, which is certainly not the case.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about accountability here, because I think another misconception that people have is often that they have to do this alone, or they're the first person to ever struggle with this thing, or they're a complete isolation, which I don't think that's necessarily the case. What do you see as the role for either learning from others or having accountability? What's the role for other people in helping shape habits?
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of this lifelong process, is having that, or I guess really multiple people in your life that can help you get back on track. Let's say if you fall off. So I use this thing. It's called Habit Share. It's an app, and in there I can track everything I want to do that day. It can be small goals, daily goals, daily habits, or it can be big macro, worldwide, year-long, or even 5-10 year goal or habits in there. And through that app, I can tag multiple people in there to where they can see my progress and they can see if I'm truly doing what I'm setting out to do. So that's a fun and good way for me to stay on top of what I'm trying to accomplish. And then aside from baseball, let's talk maybe fitness. If that's why people hire fitness trainers, right?
Right.
Or coaches. It's because you don't want to let that other person down, and going through any process really. So people, I forget the numbers, but the saying that people are much less likely to not show up for a workout if they know they're supposed to meet somebody there.
Right.
So that can be a small cue to help. You don't even need to pay for a trainer, but just to say you're going to meet your friend at 6 a.m. before work at the gym, like you don't want to let that person down by not showing up. So these are all things that could really help push when, again, we fall into our normal human tendencies to fall off the wagon.
Mm-hmm. And I think even if you can't find that workout buddy, I think like with your app where you're sharing your goals, even just telling somebody else that you're going to the gym tomorrow at 6 a.m. Creates another level of accountability for you and makes you more likely to do it and carry through, which I think is great as well. You talked about the delay, the latency period, or the delayed time that people before they start to experience benefits. And I think that this is a real problem for those of us that are trying to form habits, because we view that process or that period of latency as miserable because we don't consider ourselves to be successful until after the habit is already established or after the goal has achieved. One of the ways I think we could overcome some of that is to celebrate the small wins along the way and sort of have some satisfaction in the process. So maybe you haven't achieved the ultimate goal yet, but you have consistently done the steps that you need to do to put you on that pathway. Is there a way that you use that in your life? Have you found that helpful to kind of celebrate small wins along the way, or how do you find joy or satisfaction in the process of carrying out these habits on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. For me personally, at the start of every spring training, start of every season, I'm looking ultimately like to have a really good season and a healthy season and a productive season. But to do that, I need to have a good month. And to have a good month, I need to have a good week. And to have a good week, I need to have a good day. So it's hard. to not look at the big picture
Mhm.
at the end of the day, because again, like we want to just see that a good year for me means more money, right?
Mhm.
A lot, that's a big focus.
Mhm.
But I do find pleasure, and I do find like a little internal satisfaction when I know at the end of the day, when I'm kind of reviewing my mental checklist of everything I did, if I did everything right, I know that I'm setting myself up to have that good week. And again, that good week turns into a good month, and that month turns into a good year. So,
Mhm.
um, yes, I think it's important to have like that big future thinking goal, but if you can internalize it into like, what do I need to do today to set me up for that year or that 5 year or that 10 year period, like that's a really healthy and more achievable way to look at it.
Mhm. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of willpower. I think a lot of people will say, well, it's easy for you to do this. You've got a lot of willpower, just kind of comes automatic to you. I don't have as much willpower. This is not for me. I'm not going to be able to do that. So, how do you see willpower impacting this? And I guess another way of asking that is people who struggle to form habits, is it just because they don't have enough willpower to do it?
Um, and yeah, willpower is definitely something that varies person to person. But I think that's what you're going to need to do as an individual to figure out like what your identity is.
Hmm.
And as soon as you sort of define who you want to be and define your identity, it's easier to create those goals that are going to align with that identity and be as consistent with that throughout the process. So, like I was talking about, for me, I want to identify as somebody who is very consistent day in and day out. I don't want to be, um, we call them emotional roller coaster guys in baseball. That's if I have a good day, you're going to know because I'm loud, I'm happy. But if I have a bad day, you're never going to hear from me. So that's one of the things I do not want to become. And I've set out to define myself as that from the beginning of the year so that I know um, my goals need to not help me fall down that path. So
Hmm.
I think once somebody falls or figures out who they're trying to be and then defines those goals to help them become who they're trying to be, it becomes a little bit easier,
Yeah,
maybe.
I actually think I agree with that. That is brilliantly stated. I think that oftentimes a lack of willpower, or what's perceived as a lack of willpower, actually has nothing to do with willpower. It's that individual just hasn't defined who they are, what they want, what they
Yeah.
value, and why they're trying to do this certain thing. And I think before you try to start the new habit, you got to spend some time asking yourselves those questions.
Yep.
What am I? How am I doing? What do I want? How am I going to get there? And in reality, you don't need willpower to ask yourself any of those
Right. Yeah.
questions. And I think that if you can have a good handle on the answers to those questions, then it requires a lot less willpower. If you see the purpose in what you're doing,
Yep.
that lowers that resistance.
For sure.
It lowers the barrier and it allows you to keep doing that thing much easier, which I think can be helpful.
Yeah. So every year I'll start with I have this piece of paper that at the start of the year I'll write down kind of my core values, what motivates me, my principles, and then I'll write down some goals. And they can be anything from like what I want or what I'm hoping to achieve in a day, a week, a month, 5 year, 10 year, that kind of thing. And then so I know that throughout the year, whenever I'm kind of in a rut or I need a little bit of a motivation, I'll go back to that sheet and kind of reflect on have I been controlling what I need to that's going to align with this piece of paper and align with hopefully what I have identified myself as. And it's hard because it's a time where you need to be truly honest with yourself, and you don't want to fluff it up or anything because
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to be personal. I'm not showing it off to anybody. It's supposed
Right.
to reflect who I am as a person, what I want to become. So it's important to be honest because that's what's going to help um, catapult you
Mm-hmm.
into creating those new habits.
That's great. And that's something I think we should all be doing, right, at least annually. I think it's a great recommendation. Let's talk a little bit about timing before we get into the last section. There's often this sort of old adage that it takes 21 days to form a new habit. What are your thoughts on that? Is that true? Is that an oversimplification?
I think like bare bones is probably a pretty good estimation. I've heard different numbers. I've heard a couple weeks. I've heard hours. All that stuff. I just think the important thing is just doing it consistently and doing
Mm-hmm.
it daily. And once you get on that routine of just consistently doing it and feeling that gratification from doing it, it just becomes easier daily.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like dominoes. Once they get going, it's hard to stop them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great. And that's really sort of how we should approach this, is to just think about it on a daily basis. Are we making forward progress? I think oftentimes if we say, oh, I got to have this figured out and,
Yeah.
routinized in my life by 21 days or 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, or I'm a failure. So I think sometimes that can lead to us putting unnecessary pressure on ourselves. In reality, it probably depends. There's some habits that I think are pretty easy to form, that you do pretty quickly. Some take a lot longer. I know some in my life. I mean, it's taken me 6 months or a year before I feel like I've got a good steady routine that I want to keep following. And I think part of it probably depends too on kind of where you are on your habit forming journey. If you're somebody who's been passionate about it since high school or college, you're probably going to be a little bit better, and it's going to be easier for you to pick things up. And if you're doing it in other areas of your life, it's easier to translate to different domains. If you're new at this, though, I would say give yourself some grace a little bit too, and
Absolutely.
don't expect perfection. I think that's often a common setback as well. Well, let's jump into the third section now, where we'll actually talk about some practical strategies that can hopefully help us create sustained beneficial habits. So can you give, and I know there's no one right way of doing this, but just your general thoughts on sort of a step-by-step process or framework for successfully building a new habit from scratch?
Yeah, so the tool I was talking about earlier, Habit Share, I think that's really helpful. It's just a way for, we're on our phones a lot, and it's an app. And I know it's, you don't, a lot of people don't want another app
Mm-hmm.
that they have to focus on, but you can set reminders on it. You can have it buzz you whenever you want. And then it's almost like a little game. You go in there and check it off. Again, you have to be honest. You have to answer it truthfully. For me, I kind of view it as a game where if I do it, I get a green check mark. If I don't, I get an X. And I view it internally as like I get mad if I see a lot of X's. But I know I'm human, so it's going to happen over time. Especially, we got kids. There's just distractions everywhere. But I think that it may not work for everybody to view it like that, but for me especially, I'm so competitive that with myself, even that if I see a red X's, I know the next day I have to attack it, make sure that I don't see those for a while. So I think that's a really good tool. Um, and then I just think like starting small is a good way.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a lifelong journey, and it's going to continue being one. Um, there's a Navy SEAL quote. Again, I can't remember who says it, but it's I think it goes like um, the road to success is a never-ending one, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's kind of like how I view my profession, my life, everything, because everything's a daily struggle. There's always going to be distractions, but it's those daily wins that compound over time that just help create that path to success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's great, and I think that you're right. So it's a journey, not a destination. This is a pathway that we're on that
Yep.
we want to stay on, and to kind of mix in some of the things you talked about earlier. I think that it's important. As you're starting a new habit, spend some time thinking about who you are, what you value, what gives you meaning, what gives you purpose, why you're wanting to do this new thing.
Mm.
Starting there, as you mentioned earlier, I think can be immensely helpful. You mentioned starting small. I
Yep.
think that's huge. We often overestimate what we can accomplish in the short term and underestimate what we can do in the long term. So I think start small, stack up some small little wins,
That's right.
and then build from that. I love what you're doing about sort of gamifying the process.
Yeah.
So you're a competitive guy. You like to see check marks, hate to see the red X's. So you found a way to gamify it and make it fun. And in reality, what you're doing is you're just sort of taking the part that could, to some people, be maybe boring and monotonous, and you found a way to make it fun, exciting,
Yeah.
and sort of play to your competitive drive a little bit, which is great. So you've made it unique to you. So I would encourage our audience to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Those are great. Talk to me a little bit about the process of habit stacking. So this is a concept that's out there where it basically talks about if there's a new habit that you want to do, tie that into your current routine or something you're already doing. And that might make it easier. You talked about having cues
Yep.
earlier that you use that are helpful for you. Do you see any value in doing that? So if I say, hey, I'm already good at doing, these things, but I also want to do this. Well, let me just tack that into my already existing process. Have you found that to be helpful?
For sure. I think another good word is like a trigger, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So like once you accomplish a habit that you're already pretty good at, maybe that's what triggers the new habit that you're trying to form. So again, this goes back to there's this quote that we've all heard from I think he was a naval 2 or 3 star at one of the commencement speeches at the Naval Academy. He was saying talks about making your bed every day.
Yeah.
And it's a good way. That's a small win, small habit that could compound into larger, tougher habits for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that small win that I think the numbers show. Like if you do that every morning, then things start to domino after that
Mm-hmm.
and compound after each other. So just find those. I would say find those few things that you already do successfully that you do automatically, you don't even think about, and couple it with something that you're really trying to do. So, for example, let's say you're trying to drink more water. Well, you can set the habit, set the trigger to where as soon as you wake up, you put something next to you, and let's say your first one is making the bed. So once you make the bed, the water's right there. You make the bed, trigger. Okay, I got to drink some water. So that's already right there. So then, I think that goes into a little bit of one of the things in Atomic Habits that James Clear talks about is you want to make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the water example, you're making it easy by putting it right there. There's no thought. You see it, you do it, and you just you check it off. So that could be something that's pretty efficient at trying to attack that new habit.
Mm-hmm. And that concept of, starting the day off by making your bed or drinking the water or doing that easy thing, I think it's also helpful because if you do that, if you set something small, something very easy that you can accomplish, and you do that first thing in the day, you have now been successful in your first task. Whereas if you don't do that thing,
Yep.
if you hit the snooze button and you roll back over into bed, you didn't get up when you wanted to get up, you have now failed at the first task of the day. And unfortunately, failure, even in a small thing, often gives you permission to lower your guard, lower your standards, and fail at the next task. You say, "Well, I've already failed. I might as well just this day is ruined. I'll
Right.
kind of let it go."
Yep.
Whereas if you have a success, even if it's something small, getting out of bed, drinking the water, making the bed, now you've said, "Okay, I'm hot right now. I'm on a streak
Yep.
here. I'm winning. I'm stacking up wins, and I'm going to keep doing it." So I think that it's sort of either direction you go becomes sort of this self-perpetuating cycle, either in the positive or the negative direction, which I think is really good. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that people can do to keep themselves accountable. We talked a little bit about accountability earlier. You mentioned that you have an app that you use, which I think is really helpful. You also have you'll communicate with other people. What are some tips that you would give to our folks out there about accountability? Even repeating some of the things that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, I just think that accountability is what keeps us on the right track. We're all human. We all make mistakes. I don't want to say always, sorry, but a lot of us, me included, will fall into some bad habits and fall off the path that we've been having some good success with. So those people that we can count on to help get us back on that right path is necessary. And no matter who you are on this process, wherever you are, you're going to find some times where you're going to need those people. So it's just those people you can trust, whether it's your spouse, your coach, your best friend, anybody. I just think it's pretty important. But then I think like at the end of the day, like you need to hold yourself accountable, and that's why I like that app so much, that Habit Share app, because it's really a competition versus myself. And I have some pretty lofty goals, and I know that those goals aren't going to be accomplished if I stay on the right path, and that helps me with that. So I think you can't go wrong with either of those, and it's just finding those people or things that help keep you there.
Yeah, and you made a great point there that your accountability can be another person,
Mm-hmm.
or it can be an app, or it can be a reminder that you've written down,
Yep.
or it can be a deal you've made with yourself. I'm not going to allow myself to do X until I've accomplished Y.
Yep.
Whatever. There's all sorts of forms out there, but I would say whatever it is, you got to figure out something that will not beat you up too much
Yep.
when you mess up, because you're going to mess up, but will also not let you off too easy as well. So you sort of need that right blend of being firm and holding you accountable without beating you up too much.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about mistakes. So inevitably, none of us are perfect. We're all going to fail at this from time to time. How do you handle it when you slip up, or you fall out of a habit, or you make a mistake?
Yeah, I saying a little bit about it earlier. I get a little upset at myself, but I think it just speaks to my competitiveness. So I will take a little bit of time to reflect on like what allowed me to get to the place where I failed or I fell off, and I try to figure out why or how did I get there before doing that next thing on the list that I know I need to do to hopefully get right back on that path and feel that win internally. So it's I found a pretty good method of it's just reflection. I also journal daily, and it's just I write down what I want to accomplish that day. And there's also like a 24-hour like reflection period in that journal. And I need to be honest with myself and see in the past 24 hours, did I do what I set out to do? And did I accomplish it? And if I didn't, okay, what do I need to do today to make sure I didn't do that? And how am I going to do it? And so I don't make that same mistake again. So I think writing it down is another big tool for that as well.
That's great. So you're sort of constantly kind of optimizing and tweaking what you do and changing it to help you get to that goal you need to.
For sure.
And regroup. If you mess up, hard on yourself, hold yourself accountable, but figure out, okay, what do I need to do differently next time
I don't want to make the same mistake again.
Right. Great. Well, last question for you in this section. You've kind of listed a number of different things that we can and should be doing, but I'm going to give you a chance to kind of list them out quickly. So can you give me a list of sort of your top tips and tricks for people for forming new habits, sort of a quick bullet format?
Yeah, sure. I would say one, start small. Find some things that you do automatically already and just try to couple those with some things that you're trying to accomplish. I think feeling that internal win and feeling that success from the beginning is powerful, and it helps us all stay motivated in the grand scheme of things. Another one, I would say writing things down, putting them on your mirror, putting them on your phone as reminders, apps, journaling. Just when you're constantly seeing them and you're constantly writing them down, it's pure motivation at that point. And it's just a good way to write down what you're doing. If it's working, you're measuring it. If not, okay, you come back the next day and change it up a little bit. So journaling, all that, apps, those are good tools. And then, like we talked about, having an accountability partner, whether that be a person, your spouse, best friend, coach, parent, or just like having that inner competitiveness versus yourself, I think are pretty powerful and will help you in the long run stay on top of things.
Excellent list. All right, so let's jump into the summary now. This has been a phenomenal discussion. I've learned a lot in talking with you. I'm going to take just a minute here to kind of summarize my biggest learning points or take home points. So things that I've learned mostly from this session are the number of things that we do that are habitual and maybe that we're unconscious of is massive, probably 50% of our actions. And those have a tremendous impact on our outcomes, good or bad. And so I think it's very important for us to pay attention to those habits. Most of the negative habits we do or the bad habits we do are centered around us seeking instant gratification, whereas most of the good habits or positive habits are often us seeking longer term benefits or success or gratification. So that's something that you can use to determine, is this a good or a bad habit? Think about the gratification that you're looking for. I do think that you have to base your habit in your own values, meaning, and purpose, as Griffin has explained to us. And also, like, start small. Try to do small things, stack up some small wins, find a way to get some accountability, reward yourself along the way, take joy in the process and not just in the end. And then ultimately, you're going to mess up at some point. So figure out what you're going to do. Plan for those relapses. So like Griffin said, reflect on those. Okay, what am I going to do differently? How am I going to accomplish this the next time? So those are a lot of the big take-home points for me. And Griffin, I want to give you a chance to kind of summarize as well. I'll re-ask you the three big questions that we went through. You can give your quick answers to those. So our first one, what does it mean to form a habit, and why is it so crucial for productivity and personal growth?
Yeah, real quick, forming a habit. I think it's just identifying what you want to accomplish and setting those small goals to attack daily to achieve that habit or that long-term goal. And then I think it's important is because it's basically who we all are at a simple form. We're all trying to accomplish something in our lives. Everybody's goals and values are different, so we're all on a different path. But I think we're all ultimately on the same road, which is never ending, to just become the better version of ourselves.
Great. And our second big question, what are the main challenges people face when they're trying to develop good habits?
Just time component. Everybody, myself included, gets a little distracted when things aren't necessarily happening overnight. So I think it's just important to realize and remember that, again, this is a lifelong battle in some cases, and that it's just you need to be patient with yourself through the process and be forgiving, because there's going to be times where you're going to be in a rut and you got to get back on the horse. So just be prepared.
Good. And the last one, what practical strategies can help us create and sustain beneficial habits for the long term?
That's where the accountability partners come in huge. I think just at the end of the day, just being able to accurately and honestly identifying who you are and what you want to accomplish, and who you are at your core, will help clearly define those goals in a more personal matter that will be easier to tackle for each individual.
Excellent. So now for our challenger call to actions, we always like to end with sort of a challenge that we want to issue to you to kind of help you get started in the process. And just like making your bed or drinking that first cup of water, we want to give you the first success in this process. So the thing I want you to do this time around is pick a habit, either a new habit that you want to institute or something you've been struggling with for a little while. We all have those. So spend some time reflecting. Think about what that habit is. And then ask yourself, why is it that you want to accomplish that? And figure out if that habit is something that's consistent with your own purpose, meaning, and values. If not, you might be struggling because it's the wrong habit for you. If it is, if you really think that this is something that you need to be doing, then I would suggest write it out and write it out in the smallest possible steps. So don't figure out how you can accomplish the entire task or the entire goal, but break it down into small pieces and say, what is the one smallest step that I can take that'll put me in that right direction? And then how can I take that step and do it consistently? And how can I get that first win? Then I'll know what's the second step and then the third step and keep going. And we talked a lot about accountability, so I would figure out how you can build in some accountability by that, whether that's either writing and journaling to yourself, using an app, finding a partner, but find some form of accountability. And so share this goal that you have with someone or something else as well. So that's our challenge for today. So that's it, Optimizers. There you have it. Griffin Jax just did an excellent job of taking us through today's session, forming habits for success, creating productive consistency in everyday life. So I think this is a massive topic with a lot of value. Griffin, really appreciate you joining us today and sharing your experience, not only in your professional life as a baseball player, but also your military career and your personal life as well.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. And to our audience, thank you for listening. And as always, remember to live intentionally, consistently better. Keep striving to be the best human you can be and never stop optimizing. Thanks for listening to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project. If you like this episode, hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find us. Know someone who might benefit? Share the episode with them to join us in our mission to help as many people as possible become the best humans they can be. Have feedback or a topic idea? Email us at optimize@mayo.edu. And be sure to look for us on Instagram, X, and YouTube.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be relied upon for medical, professional, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional for any questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.